I did request some reports at times because I was curious. It's pretty standard fare for either you do a 990 form or, churches will do annual reports or something like that, just to kind of keep people up to date with just general idea of how much money's coming in, where it's being allocated.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, where's the money going? I'm the national director. I'm having to sort of raise money for things, but I don't know where any of the money's flowing.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Wake Up and Win podcast. Today, I'm your host, Blaise, and I've got a special guest on the line with us today. Today, we're talking about the situation with Sean Feucht Ministries, the Burn 24/7, Let Us Worship, the whole bag of it, basically. And we've got a gentleman that ran with Sean for many years. He's known him since 2012, and he and his wife got involved in the Burn in 2012. He's still in the worship and prayer movement, and he's highly respected in the worship and prayer movement. And so I want you guys to hear his story, because as all this is coming out, there's so many moments where when a leader gets accused of something and it seems like it's legitimate accusations, one of the biggest and easiest ways to delegitimize somebody is to say, well, they're deconstructionists, or they're a leftist, or they're a liberal, or they're this or that or the other. But the majority, if not all of these stories, especially, and the reality is, if the accusation is true, it doesn't matter what that person's doing. At the end of the day, the truth is the truth. But I just want everybody to know, in this case, with truthandfreedomstories.com and with Christy Gafford and so many of others that have spoken out in regards to Sean Feucht, so many of these guys are still in the same movement, still in the same vein as far as the worship and prayer movement. And that's definitely the case, it seems, for Matthew Lilley and his wife. Matthew was the national burn director for years for the Burn 24/7, which is one of Sean Feucht's main ministry startups that he started in 2006. And he's got stories, and they've got a story that they want to tell, he and his wife. And so today we've got Matthew Lilley on the line. Matthew, thank you so much for coming to be with us. Welcome to the show, brother.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks, Blaise.
Definitely. So, Matthew, tell us a little bit about your background. And I know you just put a video out today, actually. It just went live today, which is today's Monday. And so you told your whole story in that. So we're not going to get all the same exact details of that, but just give us the background of how you met Sean Feucht and got involved in his ministry.
Sure. Yeah, we've been involved in similar kinds of worship and prayer ministry for years, really since I was a young adult, and here in North Carolina. And so I had heard of Sean when he first kind of was getting the burn going, 2008 or something like that. But it wasn't until 2012 I read one of the books that Sean wrote with Andy Bird, and felt stirred to reach out and try to connect with the movement. And so that's when we did that. We reached out to them. I met Sean at an event he was doing. He came through our area, and basically we synced in. We were leading a house of prayer. We had a prayer room here in North Carolina at the time. And so we were just kind of connecting in to be a part of the bigger movement, so to speak, the kind of connectedness, the network that was forming around Sean and the Burn 24/7 at the time. There was a lot of excitement. And so we were excited to hop in at that time.
Right on. So when you met Sean, you started connecting. When did you guys became burn directors locally in Greenville first, right?
Right. Yeah.
What year was that?
That was 2012. Yeah. Basically, as soon as we reached out, they kind of adopted us in immediately so we became the local directors for Greenville, North Carolina. Yeah. And there wasn't a whole lot of activity in our area at the time. And then because of our, relationships and connections in the area in our house of prayer and stuff, other people kind of started connecting in too. And it wasn't long, within a couple of years, that Sean asked me about becoming a regional director, which in the burn world could be, in the U.S., it was a group of states. So for me, it was Southeast U.S. And then I was not only doing our local worship events like burn events, but then I was helping coordinate the other burn leaders in the Southeast, keep them connected, host Zoom calls, help new ones get started, and that kind of thing.
Okay. And so for context, most people understand this, but I'll just give a little context for a burn. It's basically a 1-day, 24-hour prayer set or prayer session that you're going to do. Anybody's invited in, but you have a local director, and it's like a whole day of prayer with a couple hour sets, different people leading the prayer set or leading the worship. And you have to have directors because they're going to organize and put it together once a month. Is that right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, exactly. It's the kind of extended worship nights. I mean, sometimes it was only 6 hours. Sometimes it'd be the whole weekend. Yeah, it
Okay.
just depended. But yeah, so the local leaders are coordinating with worship leaders basically in their area to put on these events. Yeah.
Right on. So you mentioned one of the things you mentioned in your conversation that you and your wife were having on your channel was that when you first got involved, 2012, 2013, you became the Southeast director, regional director. You saw dysfunction. You guys used that word dysfunction. You said we saw dysfunction. But in hindsight, it's always 2020, right? When you first come into place, you're like, well, I'm not going to start pointing out dysfunction everywhere. But at what kind of things did you see in hindsight during those first couple of years that kind of raised the red flags, but you didn't really feel comfortable yet talking about it, but it became more accentuated over the years that it's clear as day now?
Yeah. Well, we would do these annual summits with all the burn leaders. And so once I became a regional leader, I was invited into like a pre-summit where it was just Sean and some of the other regional or national leaders. And that's when I really kind of started seeing, after a couple of years, I was able to see behind the scenes and get a little glimpse of things. And I was very surprised by the culture that was in the burn movement. Like the very first one we went to, I was just shocked that we weren't even like praying together. um, it was like almost like a bros hanging out, talking about other people. Like there was a whole lot of, gossip about other people that were part of the burn that had left or their ministries. We
Mm-hmm.
like go out and they'd go to a brewery or something and get beers. And I was kind of like, I was very confused because I expected it to be more of, like, let's get together and pray and seek the Lord for our movement. And I'm all for hanging out and I'm fine with having a beer too. But I was very confused by the culture of the ministry. And to the extent that, and it was also just really disorganized, which is
Yeah.
like, okay, things can be a little bit disorganized, but it was so many things were happening that people were getting burned. People that were trying to organize the summit, even they would make plans, for months, and then Sean would just on a whim say something and shift everything, like the venue for the summit, like a couple of days before the event or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And it's like you go, oh wow, this is kind of crazy. It's a whirlwind, that kind of thing. But
Yep.
then after you've been behind the scenes for a little bit, you realize people are getting hurt, people are getting used, people are getting taken advantage of, people are putting their lives, hours and hours and hours of work into things, and then it's just they're getting the rug pulled out from under them. And so at first it just kind of seems a little chaotic and a little
Mm-hmm.
disorienting, but then you start to realize people are actually getting hurt and getting taken advantage of. So it was very disorganized, very very strange culture, to the point that I almost wanted to quit and not do the regional role.
Right.
And basically one of the other guys that was involved sort of talked me into it. And so I decided to stick it out and try it. So
Okay. So you mentioned an interesting word, especially in regards to us talking about this. You said gossip, right? And so what comes up in this conversation is people think that when you and Christy and Jesse and different people are whistleblowing here, they're going, well, don't gossip about Sean. Don't gossip about this,
right.
that, or the other. Can you, from your perspective, because I want you to also get into, there's another story you mentioned about a couple named Robin and Claire, how they were talked about their departure, if you're open to talking about that. But first, I want you to talk about this kind of idea of why it's necessary to speak about these things and why it's not gossip. What's the difference between like, okay, well, we're just talking bad about everybody that left the burn and kind of throwing different ministries under the bus versus going, well, let's publicly talk about this, not just behind closed doors. Let's talk about this. What's the purpose of coming out with this story at this point? And I don't know if that question's clear enough, but just if you could run on that, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's one thing to confront a brother or sister in Christ that are actively in sin rather than is just talk about them, you know? And so I outlined in my letter that I released, my public letter, I have tried to confront these things privately. I tried it when I was in the burn. I've tried over the last few months to reach out to Sean. I'm not getting anything back from him, from board members, that kind of thing. And I know many people who have tried to confront Sean over issues of lying, mistreatment, I would say spiritual abuse, financial shadiness, that kind of things. People have tried in private to confront these sins, and I think there's a biblical precedent that says when an elder is persistent in sin, Paul said to Timothy, there's multiple witnesses and they persist in that sin, that you do have to bring it up publicly. And I've had to wrestle with this even biblically. Like, is this, because I don't like the whole exposure culture. My personality, I'm just not a big fan of it
Sure.
at all. And I would much rather things be resolved privately. I've never done anything like this with any other ministry or leader. I'm just not that guy. So that's the difference to me. Is it's like when you've tried to confront sin privately and that hasn't been repented of, there's biblical protocol for how to deal with that. You take it to your local church, Matthew 18, that kind of thing. And then with leaders, there's times where you need to take it public in whatever context they're ministering in. And for someone like Sean, he's ministering globally. He's online, he's on all social media, et cetera, et cetera. And so, like, to me, it was appropriate, if he's not going to respond, if he's not going to repent. And his only response has been YouTube videos where he's lying more about the whistleblowers who did come out. That's been his only response. And so to me, it shows that he's persisting in this kind of behavior, and it makes sense to bring it out publicly. Whereas what we were doing back in the burn days is we were just sitting around on couches, hanging out, having lunch. And it was like someone had left the burn. And so Sean has to give a reason for why they're gone. And so he would say, oh, well, they just flaked out. They couldn't handle it. Or I don't know if maybe they're backsliding, or, maybe, they're, like you said, gone woke or leftist or something like that. There's all kinds of different reasons where these people would get talked about, where it was always like their problem. They did something bad. That's why they're gone. And then you find out later that everybody's, getting tired of being in this situation. And at some point they leave, and then you realize, oh, this was just trying to gossip and cover up what the real issues were. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense. And it's a great way to put it, because, you said somebody leaves the ministry, so Sean has to create a reason why, versus just saying, yeah, there was just some disagreements. They didn't like the way we ran things. We weren't really in alignment. Like, there's got to, like, instead of just being honest, or even some people that leave without any major cause of a problem, to create a kind of narrative that says, well, they're bad, they couldn't hack it, they couldn't work hard enough, etc. It really creates this idea. And this is the thing. The same story that you're telling is the same story that I've heard as I talk to these different whistleblowers. They're like, yeah, I'd be in the car with Sean, and he'd start talking about this person that left last year that we all knew, and it was all their fault, the reason they left. They're bad,
Right.
or they're this, or they just aren't on the cutting edge of the move of God any longer, etc. And so it's really interesting, and I think that, that right there is a red flag to anyone, that any of our listeners out there, anybody out there that goes, I'm in a church, and every time we see somebody go, we start hearing about their bad side suddenly.
Right.
You just got to know that you'll be next. If you ever leave, you might be the golden child today, but you'll be next tomorrow in that conversation. And so can you talk
such
about
a weird pressure
Yeah, go
on
ahead.
you, man, because it's like, when you're still in it and you realize anybody that leaves, that's what they're getting. Like, there's repercussions to leaving, even though
Right.
you can say, oh, you can leave anytime. You feel the pressure of like, oh man, if you leave, or when you leave, that you're going to be the one that gets talked about in those meetings among people that are all your friends, and Sean's, got a lot of influence with a lot of people. And so it creates a weird environment where you're a little bit scared to step out and leave because of the ramifications of that.
That makes so much sense. And I think it's a really good, there will be people that are in the burn right now, that are in a part of Let Us Worship right now, that are watching this because they've trusted you. They trust your voice. They trust who you are. They go, oh, Matthew Lilley is talking? Like, I need to hear what he's saying. This might not just be all a bunch of gossip. Like, I got to hear what he's saying. And different people for different people. Like, others listen to Jesse because they trusted Jesse. Same thing with Christy.
Right.
And so my point is that everybody listens in a different way when a different name comes forward. And so if you're in the burn or you're in Let Us Worship and you're hearing this and you go, oh, that's why I hear bad things about so-and-so. Matthew heard bad things about people back in 2019, 2017. So this same pattern is still in existence. It's just one of those things that you go, okay, this has been going on for a long time. You mentioned that name of those folks, or maybe your wife mentioned it. You don't have to go into detail about them necessarily, but I guess she had said when Robin and Claire, we heard that story and that stuck out to us, and we go, wait a second, they're not bad. They're our friends. Why are they talking bad about Robin and Claire? And that's what, can you talk about that experience a little bit?
Yeah, that was just last year. That was after we had already left the movement, but Robin and Claire were the Burn 24/7 UK directors. So they were over the entire nation of Burn 24/7. And I'd met them briefly when I was in the movement. But then we reconnected because I wrote a book about the same topic that he was doing a master's thesis on. And so we were just kind of like nerding out about theology stuff, and we became friends. They would come, they've got some family in the Carolinas here. And so they'd come visit family and we'd get together and have lunch. So I'd become friends with these guys. We'd do Zoom calls. And I was like, these are great people, church people, Bible people, theology people, but also zealous for the Lord. And then I found out that they had made the decision, and their team in the UK had made the decision to disassociate from Burn 24/7 and Sean, and basically take what was happening in the UK and rebrand it and have their own separate network there. And I wasn't totally surprised by that, just knowing some of the issues in the culture of the movement and the ministry. But then come to find out that, the story on the back end with Sean is that it's all about politics, and everybody in the UK, has gone leftist and woke. And that it was all about that. And as if the Burn folks over there, as if Robin and Claire and the rest of the leaders there were that way. And I know that they're not. Definitely the politics in the UK are different than they are in the US, for sure. But they love Jesus. They're Bible people. They're people of character. And I was going, oh no, this is really bad. This was just last year. And then he even posted some things on Facebook where he shared their update about their ministry transition. And he just went off just saying things that were clearly trying to make it seem as if they were going off the track, off the rails. And I was like, this is just so bad. This is just not true. And this was happening around the same time as stuff was going on with Christy, I think too. And, and so, yeah, it's just the unfortunate thing is the pattern that we saw years ago, 10 plus years ago, is still continuing today. And that's why I think, even though I've been out of the burn for 5 years now, I think we need to keep addressing this. So,
yeah, no, that's super helpful. And I'm glad that we hit that, because it gives a lot of context for what was happening with Christy. For those of you that have listened, when we had Christy Gafford on, she shared her story about the national call, or I guess the international or global call for the burn when they were discussing what was going on with the UK. It was painted in a light that was very negative about the UK leaders, which Matthew just kind of shed a little bit of light on there. And Christy was just taken back by that. As the national director, USA national director, she was just so taken back. And Sean invited people to speak into it on that call, but it had already been directed a certain narrative, a certain way. So, I mean, who's going to speak up and be like, well, actually, I disagree with all of you guys that are up there talking like this. So the next day she sent that email to everyone and said, I actually do disagree, and this is why. And then they just kind of sidelined her and kicked her out, basically. But that
and
sheds...
if I could just say real quick, I just want to be careful, because Robin and Claire have been so like they haven't said anything other than the official statement for Burn UK, in their ministry transition. So I don't want to try to say anything more than
Of
what
course.
they've said, but the fact that Sean has, he replied publicly to what they said. And so I just, even as just them being my friends, I'm just like, come on, like that was not right. Like he's saying things
Totally.
about people that I know that are not true. And so I don't mind commenting on that publicly since Sean did publicly as well,
Yeah, yeah, totally, and definitely not putting words in their mouths at all, because everything that we're talking about now is really Sean's reaction to their basic statement. They didn't. There's no different reasons why they left than what they've said. So
Exactly.
we know only what they've said out of the UK, but we also know the way it was treated publicly in the U.S. and it was and it's enough for everybody to go, wait a second, like why are they being spoken about this way? These are good people, and so it's just interesting to kind of see that the way that narrative was painted. Okay, let's get back to kind of your story here. So as you had mentioned something in 2017, I think, regarding the reimbursements, and I keep hearing this kind of story from different people. Like, I heard one story about somebody, there was like a busted like piano, and they had to like run out and get a new piano for the Let Us Worship event, and it was Richie, I think it was, I believe.
I think you're right.
So, and he's just like, hey, can I get that $300 for this piano that I had to buy? And Sean's like, $300? And Richie's thinking, dude, you got millions flowing through the accounts. Why can't you just give me $300? But right. And just that type of mindset and attitude of like, so you had mentioned something about how initially with Sean, your activity ramped up and your workload ramped up. You became the national director and your workload was pretty high. So there were some private conversations between you and Sean where there were some promises made, like, yeah, we want to eventually start paying you and increasing your revenue, etc. And we will reimburse you for all your travels. And then the next thing you had mentioned was that never happened, basically. Can you talk about the reallocation of your donor funds to the burn and the price that you had to pay for that, plus the reimbursement situation, and just as much as you're willing to say on that? Hey guys, real quick, just want to take a second and say this episode is brought to you by Wake Up and Win Life Insurance. We take care of clients all over the United States with their term life insurance, whole life insurance, or universal life insurance. We also do fixed and indexed annuities as well. I am a licensed insurance agent in over 30 states, and I can get a license in any state where a client is, and so it's not hard to do. So if you're interested in a consultation and just to find out, hey, what can I get here at this stage of my life with this health issue, et cetera, click the link below, and I'm happy to have a consultation and show you different strategies to protect your family and give you peace of mind. All right, guys, with that said, let's get back to the interview.
Like I said, we were doing House of Prayer here, and anyone that's kind of familiar with that kind of ministry or like missions ministry, it's a common practice to raise your own funds. So you go out and get donors who give, and that's sort of how you cover your salary if there's not like a church that's funding it all. And so that's what we had done. We had built up a team of people that were supporting our ministry, but we closed down our House of Prayer to go full, so that I could go full time with Burn 24/7. And so those that were giving their money through our ministry started giving through Burn 24/7, so that we could do that full time. But the whole conversations, which all of this is in private, none of this is in writing, which is, tends to be the case with these kinds of things. So none of it's in writing, but the promises were, oh yeah, well, we'll cover your travel expenses, because I'm the national director. So I've got to be going all over the country. We're doing these, regional summits, and I'm just going to visit the different burns and like that kind of thing. That's a huge part of my job. We'll cover your travel expenses. And as the money ramps up with the burn, we'll be able to start basically adding to what I had already raised so that my salary could increase, or at least that it wouldn't be dependent on my donors. It could kind of come out of the general fund of the burn. And so anyway, it didn't take long to realize that was not going to materialize, and could not. I never got any travel reimbursed, which meant either, number one, I had to pay for it for money that I had raised, of course, already. And, or it meant that when I was going to visit somewhere, I would have to talk to the local burn leaders and be like, hey, could you guys take up an offering, to cover my plane ticket or whatever it is. And then
Wow.
they would start going, wait a second, what's going on? Aren't you the national director? you know,
Wow.
and one of the other things I shared is eventually we had to start collecting dues, so to speak, from the local burn leaders while I was the national director. So some of them were like paying into the burn, but then they were also, when the national director was coming to visit them, I was having to sort of awkwardly like, hey guys, could you help me out?
That's
And
wild,
so
because they're like, wait a second, aren't we already doing like a 10% or 10%,
yeah,
whatever it
yeah,
is of our revenue to the burn? Does that not go to an account that pays for our national director to get here to do training or events? Or it's like,
yeah,
nope, it doesn't. We don't know where that goes. In fact, you had never even seen the books as the national
yeah.
director. Is that right?
Yeah, I was never on any boards, never had access to any of the financial records. It was all very ambiguous, kind of nebulous to me. And so, I did request some reports at times because I was curious. It's pretty standard fare for either you do a 990 form or, churches will do annual reports or something like that, just to kind of keep people up to date with just general idea of how much money's coming in, where it's being allocated.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, where's the money going? I'm the national director. I'm having to sort of raise money for things, but I don't know where any of the money's flowing.
Wow.
And so yeah, it was a big mess.
So yeah, it sounds like it, and this is big. So we're on this topic of, you're literally the national director for the burn. That means that all regional directors are coming to you for conversations.
Right.
But like,
Yeah.
probably, and anybody that's been in ministry knows it's not just the little things here and there. It's also the pastoral stuff. They're coming to you probably about lots of the stuff, right? So you're dealing with all these people. You have raised your own support for years in ministry. It's not like you got in ministry just with Sean. You transitioned your entire support base to come through the burn, which then the burn took a percentage of your support base, which is not necessarily out of the ordinary for there to be a percentage, but you're having to cover your own travel expenses to go do burn work, burn ministry. And so now, in contrast, Sean, who's the leader of the burn, but also the leader of Light a Candle, also the leader of Sean Feucht Ministries, would come into a burn city to do a burn event with his burn people. So let's just talk, what was his fee? Did he have a fee, or did he come in serving kind of like the Apostle Paul, like, hey, I'm coming in on my own hand, as an apostle, the lowliest of all? Or was there a fee for him to come in to minister to his own group?
Yeah. So one of the things that I discovered and others have discovered is that all the funding funnels down to Sean in multiple different ways. And so it gets a little confusing because he has multiple organizations: Sean Feucht Ministries, Burn 24/7, Light a Candle, and that kind of thing. And so, but yeah, when Sean would come in to do ministry somewhere, he would get honorarium, travel expenses, offerings, sell books, sell CDs, that kind of thing, sell t-shirts. All of that goes into Sean Feucht Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so he would even visit, like you said, a burn furnace, what we call them furnaces, the local communities, the burn furnaces. And he would, require an honorarium. And in the early years, the first time he came through our city, it was a very small event. We gave him a, generous honorarium for the size of event it was, and he was very thankful. But within a couple of years, as his popularity grew, the demand started increasing, even for us to bring him in, where it was like, all of a sudden I need to net, I don't remember what it was, $2,000-$3,000 this weekend
Mm-hmm.
for me to make it worth it. And I'm like, to come into our city to like, we'll cover your expenses. We'll put you up, you can sell all your stuff. We'll take up an offering or whatever. But it's like, no, I need to also get $2,000 or $3,000 on top of that. And so the money stuff just
Wow.
kept getting more and more and more. And again, he's doing all that. He's getting record deals with Bethel Music, making loads of money that way. And none of that's ever, ever, ever trickling down to the people in his network that are on the ground doing the gatherings, doing the events, building the community, ministering to people. It never flows to any of those people. But Sean, I promise you, his expenses were covered,
Right.
and he's getting paycheck. And now it's come out that
He's got 9 homes.
Yeah. He's got a bunch of personal property that somehow he's bought millions and millions of dollars worth of real estate, which I don't care about that as much. But then also the ministry is also buying multiple
Right.
$1 million plus properties. And again, you could argue that that's okay, but the issue is the contrast that you
Mm.
see between what he's doing for himself and the life he's living and the way his finances worked versus everybody else that's like busting their butt to do ministry for him, serving his ministry mission network, and nobody's getting anything. And
Wow.
so I get a little fired up about it, but it's just like it's so bad.
Well, and just to get a little bit theological, I was able to. My wife and I had the privilege yesterday to go hear Bob Gladstone speak, who was the former Fire School of Ministry director, who had worked with Dr. Michael Brown and split ways with him over the last couple of years over all the issues going on. But the man has such a powerful revelation of the role of an apostle, specifically from the Apostle Paul, not necessarily talking about modern day, but he was just talking about the Apostle Paul and the contrast that I see in the Apostle Paul's lifestyle. And I'm not even talking about having money or not having money, and that's not the point. But like you said, it's the contrast between the apostle and the people and what's required of the people to support the apostle, and this idea that you guys are all building this kingdom for Sean. And Sean could say, well, you're building the kingdom of God. You're building the kingdom of God. It's like, well, yes, God is always using anybody that, it's like Paul said when he was in prison, whether it's out of good intention or bad intention. I'm glad the gospel's preached, but hey, man, these guys are going to stand before the throne of judgment for their intentions too, And so I look at this, man, and I'm just going, oh my gosh, this story, all these stories of these people that couldn't hardly shake a dime out of the ministry that was flowing. I mean, we heard from Richie Booth, there was at any time $250,000 or more, 300,000-400,000 in an account, for these ministries, and it was hard to get any type of stipend or helpful travel expense covered. And I'm going, while you're watching a man also purchase multiple parsonages that are in the millions and hunting retreat centers or whatever he's, allegedly whatever he's using it for. And I'm just going, this does not seem right. So those out there that are going, why are you giving Sean so much heck over this? Isn't he doing great things for the kingdom of God? It's like, we want people to do great things for the kingdom of God, but there's got to be a standard, because this does not seem gospel centric. Something seems off. So you notice that it's getting worse over time. Is that kind of like, as you guys left, did you watch this getting worse and worse or hear more stories?
Well, I think the pattern's probably been the same, but Sean's popularity's gone up. The amount of money flowing through the ministries has gone up tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I would say the emphasis on money went up a lot over the years. And I personally heard Sean bragging about using ministry money for personal expenses, and I wanted to say that because uh, that's a big deal. When in the nonprofit world, not only is it a big deal morally, ethically, but even legally,
Mm-hmm.
like money that's donated to nonprofit organizations is tax deductible, and it's supposed to be used for the purpose of the ministry. And if he's using ministry money and this was maybe 2019, I'm pretty sure it was 2019 when I heard him talking about this at one of these little meetings. He's sort of telling everyone else, like, hey, this is what I did. I paid for a whole family vacation, all the costs, like with the ministry funds. You should do the same thing. I mean, that's essentially what he's saying. And there's some serious legal issues with that. I mean, it's a way to avoid taxes, because if you pay for all your personal stuff through your ministry thing, then it looks like your income's real low,
Right.
but you're using the ministry card to pay for everything. And I didn't realize until I heard Richie, he said also on the Light a Candle card, there's another $10,000-$20,000 a month being that they never saw the transactions for.
Wow.
So Sean's just saying, call it travel. But Richie, as the bookkeeper, never got access to the specific individual transactions. So Sean's using the Sean Feucht ministry card that I heard specifically for personal use. Someone else told me, oh yeah, he basically uses it like his personal debit card, just goes around and swipes it for anything he needs. and then also another 10 to 20,000 through light a candle that's unallocated. Like we don't know what any of those transactions were,
Mm.
a month. Plus, then he's getting paid, and then also, so it's just there's so much going on that's shady. And if you have a couple different organizations, you can kind of keep things siloed off in a way that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing,
Right.
and you don't realize how bad it is till you kind of see the full picture.
Yeah, that makes sense, because as the time has gone on, we saw what happened with Let Us Worship and the amount of money that flows through that ministry. I think in 2020 it went up to 4 or 5 million suddenly flowing through
Yeah.
that ministry. So I'm mentioning the $250,000 to 400,000 conservatively in one account that Richie had access to and could see. But he could see Light a Candle, he could see the burn, Richie Booth, of course. But as far as Let Us Worship, nobody that we know in this space has seen anything. And in Sean's mind, he's like, yeah, you guys don't know what's going on. Everything's clean. But it's like, well, it's kind of like when you're faithful with a little, you're faithful with much. So we know the
Right.
way things have been run in history. And so it's not too much to assume that things might not be running as clean whenever you got 5 mil running through it and you increase homes. I mean, it seems like something's going off a little bit. So,
Yeah.
okay. So tell me, in your interactions with Sean and just watching kind of like, cause somebody could say, and I've seen these comments like, well, I've got young kids and they could like, young kids meaning 30 to 40 years old. And people say, well, I've seen young kids in ministry and they're just trying to figure it out. Maybe they're just a little ADHD, high visionary, not really, is this really unethical or is it just problematic because it's just disorganized? But I've heard from others, and you can kind of give your insight. Sean's smart. He's a smart guy. He's sharp. Is this all accidental? Is he accidentally not paying Richie Booth what the normal market wage is for an accountant that runs a $2 million organization? Is he accidentally not paying back a piano that Richie Booth bought? Is he accidentally not paying you what he told you he'd pay you while you're the national director? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, great question. I heard somebody say once that Sean runs his ministries like businesses. And Sean went to school for business, actually. And so he's very savvy in a business kind of way. And when you're running a business, you should still have a healthy culture, but you should also try to make a profit. And and it is different than it is running a ministry. There's some different principles that need to be at play in the midst of all those things. And Sean is very smart, and he does know what he's doing. Like I said, I've heard him, bragging about the way he tried to sort of game the system, find loopholes, that kind of thing. He knows, he certainly knows what he's doing. It's not an accident. Um, I think I don't know what's going on in his mind. I hate to speculate
Sure.
on what's going on in Sean's mind and what his motivations are, but I do know that he is smart and he's not aloof. And yeah, so I don't know what else to say on
No,
that.
that's
But
helpful. And I want to just to kind of expound a little bit on what you said earlier with the you heard him bragging in 2019 about sharing about using a family vacation, using ministry funds for a family vacation simply because during that vacation he was able to have like lunch or coffee with a pastor. Is that
yeah.
correct?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it was, but basically he was like, if I can just do one sort of quote unquote ministry related thing while I'm on the trip, he's like, I'll just pay for the whole trip with the ministry card. And again, some people might say, oh, well, your ministry paid for wanted to bless your family or something like that. But that's not what's going on. It's like him trying to, pay for things through the ministry account so he doesn't have to get paid. He can avoid taxes. He can conceal his actual income because so much of what he's doing with ministry funds is personal. And so then you can keep your on the book, your salary's low or reasonable or whatever, but then you're getting the tens of thousands of dollars a month that's getting charged to ministry accounts. And
Right.
so, yeah.
Well,
But yeah, I think that's it for me. Having experienced that, I began to realize, oh, like this is, it wasn't long after that I was out, because I started realizing what seemed to be the case really was the case. And the very first time we wrote Sean a check that he came through and visited, I remember we wrote it to Sean Feucht. We gave him his honorarium check. And then when it came through the bank, I vividly remember this. He had written ministries beside his name, Sean Feucht Ministries, so that he could deposit it into the ministry account, which I thought, oh, that's great. He's not trying to take it for his personal money. He's trying to put it into the ministry. But then I realized, oh, if he does that, then he can just use the ministry card and swipe that. And I was like, but it was years later that I started putting two and two together, and I realized what was going on.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so let's switch gears to you saw in 2019. Because when did you leave? What year did you guys
2020.
2020. So in 2019, 2020, talk about the kind of transition for Sean going from ministry guy to I'm going to run for Congress, and I really want you guys to all back me up, because what I don't want our audience hearing is what Sean would like the audience to hear, which is all these former people couldn't support the conservative political movement, to end abortion or all the things that we've been praying for, most likely for most in the prayer movement, right? As far as
Right.
especially like ending of abortion and some of these more conservative laws. So what he would like people to think is that all of these whistleblowers are just these like strong liberals or whatever. But what was it that made you, when you saw him kind of go, I'm running for Congress, what were the red flags and what made you go, yeah, just talk about that whole thing if you would.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure it was the fall of 2019 when he shared with the Burn movement that he felt like God was leading him to run for Congress, U.S. Congress. And so by this point, I was already frustrated with a number of things. I had actually moved our financial supporters back to our own ministry because I
Okay.
was realizing things were just not playing out after a couple years like they were supposed to. And so then Sean comes and says, I'm running for Congress. And he's basically wanting everybody in the Burn to begin to support him and promote this effort,
Mm-hmm.
which is problematic in a couple of ways. Number one, there's some issues with churches and nonprofit ministries promoting specific political candidates or parties. I think some laws have changed on that. But at the time, it was like, this could jeopardize your status as a nonprofit and that kind of thing. Even beyond that, no one signed up for this. Everybody signed up for, we want to do worship, prayer, go on missions trips.
Right.
And now we're being asked to use our ministry pages on social media or our personal influence to try to promote Sean's political campaign. This is weird. So I immediately started pushing back, and it created some tension it created some tension with me and Sean. And he was kind of pulling away from the Burn already because he wanted to do this. And so he was giving more of his time to politics and stuff. But it was really concerning. He was posting on some of the main like light a candle pages and stuff like that about it. Sometimes they branded as worship nights, but the actual worship nights would turn into sort of campaign fundraisers and political rallies. And so it started to become this weird mixture of, ministry and politics,
Yep.
which made me and a lot of people very uncomfortable. And I don't mind if Sean runs for Congress. I think we need more Christians in government. That's great. But the issue is, let the Burn be the Burn, let Light a Candle be a missions organization, and you go do your political campaign. But he was trying to do what he's done for years, which is to leverage the network of the Burn for whatever he's into at the moment. And so that shifts over the years. When he was with Bethel, it was all the Bethel stuff. When he went political, it was all political stuff. And so that was very concerning. And then he started doing these let us worship things, and you throw COVID in the mix, and it became a huge mess. And for a lot of people, that was what sealed the deal. And honestly, the Burn lost a lot of people in that time, that never quite recovered, including myself. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So you left in 2020 and kind of in the midst of all this, but that was just kind of like the nail in the coffin for you because you had already had all these other red flags, all these other situations and scenarios. And you had talked about something during his kind of like political run where he would come into town where like there was an established a burn director, and suddenly you would hear from a burn director, hey, Sean's coming into our town this weekend. I didn't know he was coming. Like, we can't even get him to come and just support what we're doing locally, but we're supposed to go to his thing. Like, can you talk about that a little bit, like the disconnect?
Yeah, it got real messy, and I was having to deal with all this as the national director because, he was scheduling these worship night / political nights, let us worship things in cities all over the U.S. With no regard to the burn movement. And yeah, so like you said, there would be a burn leader that's like, man, Sean's coming to our town. We would have known to love. We would have known. We would have loved to have known that,
Mm-hmm.
so that we could have partnered together and let what he's doing for a night benefit what's happening in the city on a regular basis. And so that it
You
would be
mean
so
like
it wouldn't.
flow the people that go to this maybe worship thing, flow them toward the burn because that supports
Right.
their thing, which is part of
Yeah,
Sean's
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
rather than just kind of blow in and out and do an event, like what could we leverage these events to support what God's already doing in the city?
Sure.
And so it was just a total disconnect. I tried to kind of be the go between and create some communication, but Sean was just sort of on his mission to do these things. And that really upset a lot of burn leaders because they're like, we've given you know, some of them years and years to do this as part of, Sean's ministry, as part of his network. And of course, at the same time, Sean's going, hey, post the flyer for my event on the local burn
Mm,
Instagram or whatever. So he's trying to get everybody to throw in behind him. But then what he's doing is not supporting the people on the ground, the
sure.
volunteers, volunteer leaders who are doing that. So yeah, that burned a lot of people, and it just kind of shows again, unfortunately, where his priorities are,
Mm-hmm.
and just not being willing to even connect with or serve these folks who are a part of his own ministry that he started in
And
these
this
cities.
is the thing that I want to point out to the listeners. Again, we're looking for patterns and red flags and patterns, not just, oh, there's a leader who's a little disorganized, having some issues. Kind of like
Right.
it's kind of like Richie said, it's kind of like the entrepreneur that runs into a business and 2 years in they realize they've messed up everything and they don't know what they're doing and they get some coaching and fix it. Right. This is
Right.
like we're going on about 12, 13 years of stories of things like this to where you go, okay, these people aren't paid properly. There's pushback when asked for more payment whenever there's more work being done than can even be handled by one person sometimes. And that would be what I call not just mistakes where you get confronted and go, oh, geez, let me fix that. I didn't realize I was doing that, guys. Let me fix it. It's more like this is just the pattern of how he does things. So when I look at this, what you're saying about the local burns comes in, hey, please post this flyer on your local burn to get people to my Congress event. And they're like, well, can you tell people that we have a burn? Can you flow people
Right.
into it? It's like, it's either whether he's so disorganized and focused on this big vision that he feels like God's given him, or whether he's intentionally doing it. It might as well be an intentional situation at this point because it's a pattern of neglect for the people involved. So you're reaching people, but you're neglecting the people that are building the house with you, and so that's a problem. And so I guess I'll ask you this, and of course I want you to kind of lead out with anything else that you want to share about. But what do you like? What do you see as the opportunity here? Like in an ideal world, what would you see as the opportunity for Sean and the right response? Like right now, he's in Canada and he's over there. I know there was a Jesus March literally 3 weeks ago in Quebec, Canada, where he's saying that he got canceled in Quebec, Canada, and these people are going, wait. He's getting canceled for something different, not for Jesus. He's getting canceled
Yeah.
for his style of what he's trying to do. We're happy to worship outside, And so, anyway, not to get into all that, but what do you see as the opportunity for Sean here? Like, what would be the ideal repentance? What would that look like? And what would you say to anybody that's kind of hearing this for the first time and supporting Sean and being excited about what Sean's doing?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think he needs to take a break for sure. And I think he needs to connect with a local church. He might be connected to a local church, but I tried to talk to people that were still involved with the burn, and no one could tell me what church Sean was a part of. And because otherwise I would have gone to the leaders at that church to try to deal with some things behind the scenes. Um, but I think he needs to, I think he needs to own some of what he's done, apologize in some way. He's done some very public lying. And so I think there should be some kind of public confession and some kind of real submission to other leaders, to have some kind of time to process through what's going on. I really think the organizations need to be evaluated, investigated would be the right word, investigated, or shut down, to find out what's really going on, especially with some of the finances. So I think there's kind of two issues. There's the spiritual abuse issue, and so I don't like to use the word abuse, overuse that word, but I do think in the way that phrase has come to be known, I think that's an appropriate term for what Sean's done to a lot of people. I think the spiritual abuse issue needs to be dealt with. He needs some people that can help him with that he's willing to submit to, and go from there. And then the financial side of it, I think there probably needs to be some kind of investigation that's beyond my pay grade on how you deal with some of those things.
Sure. Yeah.
But my hope is that Sean will humble himself, confess some things. My hope is that the body of Christ will just be aware of what's going on and see behind the curtain a little bit, and honestly pull back from involvement with him, pull back from giving to him. That there's other ways to gather together and rally and worship and pray, and it doesn't have to be in that way. And so I do hope that people will disengage from him and his ministries. I think that would be best for them and for Sean in the long run. That's my hope. But of course, we want repentance, we want restoration, we want healing, all of those things. And so that's why I'm speaking out. I hope that can be the outcome.
Well, Matthew, I really appreciate it. This has been a really well-communicated story from you, just sharing your heart but being very specific. And I hope everybody can see your heart and so many of the other whistleblowers that nobody wants. This is not cancel culture. This is really just like a decade long of stories going, hey, we got to listen. We got to listen. My wife and I have told our story about what happened locally here in Greenville, South Carolina. A pastor named Chad Norris, we had no idea, but 10 years of spiritual abuse and mistreatment behind the scenes. And I was clueless to it. I had one slight story, but it wasn't super intense. And it was just kind of like off-putting. I went, that was weird. But I wasn't close enough on the inside, on staff and all that, to see that people's lives were getting ruined. I mean, very similar to what happened with you guys, where they said, let's take this money and allocate it through our ministry to you. I saw that same kind of tactic where it's like, you guys all need to step away from other ministry things you're doing and just come underneath our banner, just come underneath this. And I saw it really rock people's worlds, and people that had very established ministries had to start all over. And God's faithful. We know that. But we can also, it's our job when we see something to say something. A whistleblower, or what I would say a watchman, Ezekiel 33, if you see something, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be even prophetic. Just say the truth, say the truth. And I appreciate you guys coming out and doing that. And how can people connect with you, man, with what you guys are doing in Greenville, North Carolina?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking. I have a website, Matthew D. Lilley. Matthew D. My middle name's David. MatthewDLilley.com. And I've got links to, we got a number of different ministry things still happening. And that's the easiest way for people to connect with me through there.
Very cool. All right, brother. Well, I really appreciate you, and we'll get this one out soon. But thanks so much for coming on the show, and everybody plug in to the truthandfreedomstories.com. If you have a story about the Sean Feucht situation, please don't hesitate to reach out to them. All right, everybody. God bless. For those of you that are looking for other ways to support our work here at Wake Up and Win, we are a two-man show. That would be one beautiful woman and me, the man. But my wife and I run this show on our own, and as you can see, we've got full full-time jobs and we got kids and all the stuff. But if you've appreciated our work and what we do and you want to support us and would like to see more work or just support the show as a whole, then we've got a Patreon site, patreon.com, and I'll put the link below. You can click that, find ways to support our work here. Again, guys, thanks for everything. We appreciate just your viewership and you watching and all of your encouragement.
Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up and win. Wake up.